Welcome to the space in between. The space in between is a place where I dive deep into the vexing reality of today's often polarized times and find ways to navigate the complexity of leadership, evocative current events, and do so in a way that helps us stay in a place of high agency, hold firm to our convictions, and also bridge divides. I'm Leigh Morgan. Before we begin today's show, I have a favor to ask. After you're done listening, I would love it if you leave me a rating and a review on your podcast app. Thanks. Last February, on a cold, gray, rainy day in Seattle, I was sitting at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee in my hand, reading news on my iPad. Watching, as I had been since mid-January, a steady stream of policy announcements from the new administration. I was edgy. I saw a headline that I had been dreading. The headline basically said that the administration had just announced plans to dismantle USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development. The headline was 90% of its budget was gone and most of its grants were being stopped immediately. I felt sick to my stomach and I was also furious because unlike a lot of people reading those headlines, I knew firsthand what that meant. As an executive at the Gates Foundation and then most recently at Neotero, as well as my time in biotech, I'd spent a lot of time in places Western tourists don't go, in rural communities in sub-Saharan Africa, Central and South America, and even northern India. I know firsthand what it's like to sit with moms waiting for vaccines, knowing that if the supply runs out, it might be months before they can catch a ride back to that health clinic. And the vaccines were important because they kept their kids safe from really scary infectious diseases. I remember one visit was especially inspiring to me, but also really highlights the kind of challenges that we were now facing as a global community. My team and I sat with about 10 women in a rural village 5 hours outside of Patna, which is the capital of Bihar state in the far northeastern part of India. It was a very rural setting, and we had to trek in from the van about half a mile to a really small settlement area. And we sat there and listened to the stories of these women, and we learned that they had gotten $25 loans from USAID and the philanthropy I worked at, which had helped them build micro businesses that generated revenue that helped them buy school uniforms and books so that their kids, including their daughters, could attend primary school. If they didn't have that small $25 loan, they would not have any extra money to be able to get their kids to school. So it was a big deal, and it was amazing to hear them talk about what they were doing and their creativity and determination to really provide for their families. It was inspiring. So here I am with coffee in hand, all of these memories flooding in, and the reality of these cuts just became very stark. My lived experience told me something very different than what the headlines and what the current administration was saying. I believe helping poor people abroad is actually very aligned to American values. And yeah, USAID, not perfect, needed to be improved. But I'll tell you what, it did massively good things in the global community. And here we are now, 2026, and very sadly, much of what I feared and many other experts feared would happen, did happen. Turns out millions of people lost access to life-saving care almost immediately. The suffering was real then, it's still real today, and it's very likely to get worse. For a few weeks, I found myself checking the news constantly, actually more often than my normal often. I'd finish one article on the situation, immediately open another, and honestly, I wasn't learning anything new. I just kept doom scrolling. Can you relate? As time went on, I started to notice the toll this took on my psyche and also on my body. Not all the time, but too much of the time. My shoulders stayed tight. I wasn't sleeping very well. And emotionally, I would swing between feeling flat, angry, sometimes sad, and then at other times just super ramped up. And sometimes all at the same time. It was really crazy. I felt as though my nervous system had forgotten how to rest. One afternoon, I caught myself reaching for my phone again, ready to scroll through more unsettling headlines. And I honestly wondered, what the hell am I looking for? I already knew what was happening. There's going to be more crappy news. And that moment was important because it's when I began to shift. I realized just how deeply that dread had begun to occupy more space inside of me than I wanted it to. I felt a little, honestly, a little low agency, which is not really my vibe. And I really wanted to get my verve back. And if we're honest, pity parties are very overrated, especially for those of us who aren't dealing with the kind of traumatic suffering that others are. And so I've thought about that question a lot. The question, what am I looking for? Because I suspect many of us find ourselves in a similar situation. And here's the thing, this is true for folks on both sides of the political spectrum. We're all trying to stay informed. We're trying not to look away. We're trying to be responsible citizens, thoughtful leaders, good friends, and good parents. That cuts across political parties. And yet, it can be hard to not carry the emotional weight of the world in ways that leave us feeling smaller than we were before. At the same time, I didn't have very good language for what was happening, which is odd because I'd had a year of doing a lot of podcasts. So, truth be told, all I knew was I didn't like the toll the worry was taking. And one afternoon, I found myself checking out Chat GPT's new chat feature. And if you haven't used it, it's really freaky, weird, and sometimes fun. And it turned out I stumbled across two ideas from psychology that helped me make sense of my experience. The first is called negativity bias. Our brains naturally remember threat more easily and longer than safety. And turns out that's been kind of helpful for our species because over thousands of years, remembering danger has helped us survive. Like, where is that lion hiding? Don't go there again. And so we remember those things longer and sometimes more viscerally than positive things. And for me, the threats were the real world consequences of the cuts. And the threat was also the stark headlines that I doom scrolled. And that was the real insight about how negativity bias was working for me. The headlines, I needed to get away from my doom scrolling. The second idea is called emotional contagion. Emotions move from one person to another. And so they're contagious, kind of like grievance or feeling aggrieved. And I did a podcast about that last year. So I'll leave that in the show notes. Turns out emotions are contagious. And here's a thing to consider, because I bet you've experienced it. Think about a time when you've walked into a tense meeting. And before anyone says a word, you and everyone else can feel that tenseness. You could cut it with a knife. That's emotional contagion. Fear and dread work the same way. And this is especially true in today's low trust, hyper polarized times. When I learned those concepts, I thought, of course, I was having a profoundly human response to a profoundly difficult moment. This was true even though I wasn't the one who would suffer because of the cuts. I was safe. I was in a very privileged position. But I cared, and I didn't know what I could do to change the situation. The challenge today, then, is that those very human tendencies now exist inside systems that amplify them. So let's think about that. Social media rewards emotional engagement. What keeps us engaged? Negative headlines, negative bias. Political discourse often rewards outrage. Think about some, I don't know, well known politicians who really feel like going after the enemies is important. There's not just one politician who does that. And news organizations also compete for our attention with very stark headlines. So none of those things create fear from nothing, but they do hand the feelings of fear a much bigger microphone. Looking back, I learned that by holding on to the dread and fear and having it amplified by doom scrolling constricted me. I was really upset, and understandably so. And it's also true that that feeling consumed too much of me. It shaped what I noticed. It shaped what I expected from people. I remember one day actually daydreaming about putting a water balloon on Elon Musk's head and also to his entire Doge team. So the good news was that's kind of a comical thing to do and it's not violent. So yay for me. But the insight all this ushered in was that I didn't want to be constricted. I wanted to go back to sleeping better, not feeling as edgy, and not doom scrolling headlines that just made me feel bad and didn't tell me anything new. I wanted to remain fully human while caring deeply and not getting consumed by the suffering itself. What really catalyzed an even bigger shift for me, though, was a conversation I had with Kay Foster in March of 2025. Kay is a remarkable leader and humanitarian, and we were recording a podcast on leadership and how to cultivate a reflective practice and how reflective practice can help leaders find their ground during chaotic times. Kay told me about students at Spelman College, where she was a trustee. The student body is very diverse, and a full range of political perspectives is often on full display. She expressed unbridled optimism about the students and the school's culture, which intentionally created space for constructive disagreement and dialogue on today's many issues.
It's finding the time to be reflective. And what I've taken on is creating the place for them to be reflective. So if you had an hour in your day where there was nothing pressing on you, what would you do, right? If I gave you a book and you had an hour to literally just scribble your notes, what would you? So it's creating a place where they can actually do that comfortably. Reflection is a process of self-leadership. So how do you start with the self, and that equips you to be able to extend that to others?
Now, I've known Kay for nearly 20 years, and she has no poker face. I mean, girlfriend does not have a poker face. Her voice was full of hope and pride. So I knew that she really felt this. She had seen this. And she knew the impact that the students were having in the world now and the great impact that they would have in the future. And she also knows about the consequences of the USAID cuts. Like me, she's traveled a lot, and yet here she was, finding hope and joy even amidst this other stark reality. That really bolstered me and helped me reground myself. I felt a renewed sense of energy, and I understood that dread and fear wasn't the only thing available to me. That realization became a key of sorts to unlocking my fuller agency and even my determination to figure out how I could play a positive role. This agency wasn't about controlling the policy because I didn't have that key. I couldn't make a change that was in the hands of Congress and the administration. But the agency that I really was able to locate was an inner spaciousness. It was about finding enough space to feel grief without drowning in it, enough space to take action for justice and not become overly consumed when setbacks happened, enough space to keep laughing, creating loving, and contributing while the world remained stubbornly imperfect. So I've been working on this and experimenting with a few practices that nurture inner spaciousness ever since. The first is gratitude. Every morning, I jot down or say out loud one thing that I'm grateful for. And you've heard this from me in previous podcasts. This is a practice. I really believe in it. And I really would encourage you to give this a try if you don't already. The second practice is a simple question I ask myself when I start feeling anxious or that upset that I felt back in February 2025. And that question is, how do I stay human at a time like this? Just asking that question, it's pretty remarkable. For me, I notice my shoulders soften a little bit and I'm able to take deeper breaths. So try that question and see how it makes you feel. The third practice is also one that I've shared before, and it's know your boiling points. Boiling points are when we get activated emotionally. Sometimes they're helpful, but not always. And the key is to notice when you get near your boiling point. And it's pretty easy to tell because our bodies tend to tense up, or for some of us, we might numb out a little bit. That's a good time to stop the scrolling. It's a good time to ask the question, how do I stay human? It's a nice time to think about what you're grateful for. Watch Bridesmaids or vent with a friend. That's all fair game. These practices have really helped me, and I hope they can be helpful to you as well. The aim is to create more inner spaciousness in a time of a lot of concern, too much division, and too much disconnection. It's a time where things don't always go the way we want them to. But at the same time, we can always create inner spaciousness, which helps us deal with all the swirl around us. And in a way, inner spaciousness is like the space in between itself. It's where our personal and collective agency flourishes. So let's all flourish, because that's a place where we can bear witness, where we can work for positive change, even when things aren't going well, and not get hardened by those things and the negativity bias and the contagion of fear that is out there, because we are so much more than that. So that's it, my friend. I hope you enjoy the practices, that they're helpful, and thanks for joining me in the space in between. As always, be kind, loving, and fierce. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Space in Between podcast. If you did, please hit the like button and leave a review wherever you listen to the show. And check out the spaceinbetween.com website, where you can also leave me a message. Take good care.